Thanks for tuning into From Nothing, where we hear from proven health and wellness founders on how they actually got started. On this episode, we speak with Molly Moore, co-founder and chief health plan officer for Decent. Decent has raised $18 million from notable investors like Menlo Ventures, Foundation Capital, and QED, and is on a mission to provide affordable health insurance for all. We recently spoke with Nick Soman, co-founder and CEO of Decent, where he credited Molly as being the brains behind the operation. We talk about her path through healthcare, how she made the jump to startups through her work with a corporate venture arm, how to find more people like her who know the system but want to burn it down, and the difficulties of designing a health plan from scratch. We're super excited to talk to her. Let's dive in. What is Decent? What does Decent do? And what's your role there?
Yeah, so Decent's mission is affordable healthcare for all. We are offering affordable health plans for small group and individuals by combining them together into the same risk pool and offering them what would essentially be large group rates for small groups. So really trying to bring the advantages that the large employers are leveraging to the little guy.
Very cool. And then what's your role there?
Oh, my role. I do a lot of different stuff because it's startup, right? So I'm just a little bit of an in-house healthcare nerd. I'm also the compliance person and the finance person. And I design all our health plans and make sure we have adequate networks. I make sure that all of our DPCs are getting paid timely, all that kind of good stuff. So I do a little bit of everything, but main domain is I'm the chief health plan officer. So anything really related to do with the health plan, trappings, that's kind of all me.
I'm very curious about your early story. How'd you even get into healthcare? Like, I know you started at Aetna back in the day. Did you always want to do this?
No. So my very first job in healthcare is I worked for an optometrist after school in high school. And when I graduated high school, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I took some community college classes and worked full time and found out that, in fact, I did not want to pursue my dream job at 19, which was to be a kindergarten teacher. That I wanted to go into business. And so I left that job, finished out my undergraduate degree, and I worked full time while going to school full time, getting my bachelor's degree. And I worked doing back end sort of revenue cycle billing for anesthesiologists. And then by the time I graduated from my undergrad, I had several years of healthcare experience and now a bachelor's in business. And so I went to work for Aetna, and I loved that job at Aetna. It was really challenging. I got to talk to a lot of people. And it was right about the time where they were passing Medicare Advantage reform and high deductible health plans were kind of coming into play. And there was just a lot of change happening. And I was super young at that point. And I was like, yay, change, finally. So I didn't know. I didn't know how slow healthcare was to actually change. And so I was at Aetna and I'm like, where's the big change everybody's talking about? And then left, I went to United. And then I left United when they merged with Pacific Care, which is was a really large Pacific Northwest insurer that had a huge Medicare Advantage at-risk population, so way ahead of their time. I remember at the time when United Healthcare bought Pacific Care was making 13% margin on their Secure Horizons business. And that was absolutely unheard of. So they basically just bought this huge book of business that was extremely profitable. And with it came all of the people employed at Pacific Care. And I was like, I'm out of here. And then went to Blue Cross Blue Shield, thinking that the Blue Cross Blue Shield organization here in the Pacific Northwest is Regions Blue Cross Blue Shield, thinking that they, having all this market leverage, they were like the number one or number two insurer in the area. would be able to sort of drive change, because it's still coming, right? This is like 2007. Yeah, 2007, 2008. And I got there and they were doing things that Aetna had already done when I was at Aetna, in 2005. And I was like, oh no. But I really did love working for Blue Cross Blue Shield. I had lots of opportunity. People were generally trying to do the right thing. And then the Affordable Care Act got passed. And I realized that I wasn't in a really great position to push change along where I was. And I went back and got my master's degree, my MBA from the University of Washington. So I, of course, worked full time and went to school. And then at the end of that, I came out and I did what everybody does after you get your MBAs, you go into consulting. And so I would go into large hospital systems after the Epic medical record system had been installed and fix all of the revenue cycle processes that got broke when Epic went in. So basically Epic, when they install in a hospital, they go in, they do the installation, and usually they're accompanied by a Deloitte or a somebody, and then they all pull out. And then the hospital goes like, oh my gosh, we're just losing in this system $70,000 in charges a day, and they don't know where it's going. And so we were, I was in there and helping people sort of restructure how the queuing worked in Epic and all that stuff. But I was just early stages of dating who is now my husband, and I was on the road 4 days a week, and I was like, this sucks. And I got approached by Cambia Direct Health Solutions to come and work with startup companies. And I had done the business plan competition in my MBA program, and I had taken the funnest classes that I took were entrepreneurial marketing, entrepreneurial finance. And I really loved that. And there was just like a stoke associated, like a frantic kind of energy that was associated with this. And depending on at what speed you play this playback, you can tell how fast I talk and like how that type of energy is like my favorite. And so I took this job, and I was working for the venture capital arm of Blue Cross Blue Shield in the Pacific Northwest. So it's called Cambia Health Solutions, and it's now called Echo Health Ventures. It's a joint venture between Blue Cross Blue Shield of North Carolina and Regence Blue Shield. I think they just had another one join them, like Arkansas or something. But I was working with startups. And originally when I came in to do business development with Cambia, it was 12 companies. By sort of the middle of the road, it was 24 companies. And then we opened the Cambia Grove, which was an amazing space to sort of be able to operate out of, to really what the executive director called the primordial ooze of healthcare innovation in Seattle, and just really basically creating a space where people could grow. And I loved that, like talking to super early people going like, did you think about this? Did you think about that? And I just had such a fun time. And somewhere in there, I had a baby. And I was working VC hours, and it was impossible, like absolutely impossible. And, admittedly doing two people's jobs, and it was just like, you know what? I can't do this. So she turned one. Everybody said, don't make any big life decisions, in the first year, because it's nuts. And yep, having a 1-year-old is nuts. But I was kind of done. And I left doing all the startup-y goodness to a job with SEIU 775 Benefits Group. And if there's one thing that I learned from working with startups at Cambia and startups today, it's really that self-funded employers are pushing a lot of innovation into the marketplace. They're using their market leverage to either shove insurers the way of value-based care, or they're looking to shove large hospital systems the way of more equitable treatment of their members, et cetera. And so I went to work for SEIU 775 Benefits Group, and it was right about 2016. Trump had just gotten elected, and I was devastated because I was really hoping that up seeing the first female president. And the SEIU 775 is the union for home health workers in the state of Washington. So people who are essentially taking care of what is frequently friend or family and loved ones who are disabled or aging in their own homes. And one of the things that I remember about even interviewing for that job was talking with the executive director there, who's very entrepreneurial minded herself. Her name is Chris Arena. And she said, why this job? And I said, everyone will be aging on the backs of this workforce if they want to age in place, which is the most desired and effective way for people to age in place. And she was like, yep. And I was like, yep. And so this population that I got to go work for was not only 20,000 self-funded lives, which meant we essentially had full data visibility into 20,000 lives worth of, claims data, et cetera, is that we had, we could run experiments essentially dealing with things like social determinants of health. The population was 85% women. 1/3 did not speak English as their first language. They had an amazing population of people who took great care of other people, but poor care of themselves. And so we got an opportunity to offer them things like mental health counseling and ensuring that they could be seen at their primary care within a certain number of days, and lowering barriers to primary care access and things like that, all of the things that you really want to be able to do and offer really special people like the home health care workers. And so I got to do that. But it was a union job, and I worked about 40 hours a week. And I was like, what do I do with all this extra time and energy I clearly have? And so I started a consulting company doing consulting with startups and really talking them through, like, in your pitch deck, you need to say this and not that. And you need to have just, this type of a vocabulary, or you want to go after this type of market. And I consulted with everything from like a food is medicine company to a company who wanted to be like the go-to source for organic and ethically good baby products. Like, how do you essentially like get that resource inside of a hospital so that when a mom leaves, they know, the best things to buy for their kids. And so I loved doing that. And so I was consulting. And so I was contacted by this company, Decent. And I was late to talk with Nick Selman, the CEO, because I stopped to pet a dog because I didn't understand it was a job interview. I thought it was just consulting. And I was like, I'll call that guy. So I stopped to pet a very pretty dog, and then called Nick, and I was like, man, I'm sorry I'm late. I like stopped to pet a dog. And he's like, okay, great. We have a half hour. I have this many questions for you. And he was really inexperienced in healthcare. And I am very experienced in healthcare, but he was really good at economics. And that is where I completely nerd out in healthcare. Like, I like to understand the incentives, the transactions, like, why do we even care about value-based care? Why is fee for service bad? Why, when incentives go through an employer, are they different than when they go straight from a provider to, a patient? Like, all of those things I'm super into. And he was like, we're going to fix them all. And I was like, you are insane. You're going to have to start an insurance company if you're going to fix them all. And you're going to have to sell directly to individuals because the employer needs to get taken out. Like, I had all these opinions, and he's like, yeah, great. So do you want to come work for me when I raise our seed round? And I was like, good luck raising that seed round. And he came back like 3 weeks later, and he's like, I raised $8 million. And I was like, I'm in. I don't know how you did it, but I have a lot of opinions about how this should go. So, like, let's go. And so I went to work for Decent, and we basically, like, in under 12 months with under 20 people, stood up a health plan. And it was, I'm in heaven. Like, somebody is going to pay me to reinvent how health insurance works. I'm like, yep, I'm here for it. Let's go.
That is so cool. I love the constant thread through your career before that was just change. You were like always pursuing change and like trying to poke change.
Yeah,
Realizing
just like a little.
Yeah, just a little. Can we go a little faster?
Yeah. And then, the thing that I love about my MBA, and I was literally the poster child, like on the side of the bus for the MBA program, was that it gave me a lot of frameworks and a lot of confidence to talk to people who were decision makers and understand really what they cared about. And then understanding that no one was really able to get what they needed out of the healthcare system from any level of consumer, going like, okay, this is so messed up at this point that it's just time to just blow the whole damn thing up and start over again. So yeah, I have no problem doing that. I don't know if Nick told you, but I used to play for Rat City Roller Girls. So I have no problem smashing into things and getting back up. And if you aren't paying attention, you often get knocked on your ass in that sport. And that's really, if that isn't a metaphor for being in small business or being in a venture-backed business, I don't know what is. So yeah, it's been a super fun ride over the last 3 years to work with Decent. But I take with me into Decent experience working in VC and experience working in rev cycle and health plans and all this kind of stuff. And so as people think about entering into making essentially healthcare better, there's an advantage to having somebody who knows what's going on. But there's a huge advantage to having somebody who knows what's going on, but also hates it and wants to fix that.
So that brings me to my next question. And I want to then go into the early days of you joining Decent and what that looked like. But are there more of you? Where do you live? Like did you have a cohort that you kind of grew up with that everyone's like, yeah, we hate the system, but we'll work in it because we need to understand it first?
There are jewels inside of the system. I talk to them a lot. A lot of them, I would say, have sort of amorphous titles inside of larger organizations. They're in strategy or biz dev or something like that, because they are jacks or janes of all trades. So they understand a little bit about a lot. And then they maybe have one vertical where they can go super deep in. And generally, folks like me start inside of an organization in where they're deep, and then people sort of figure out that they can level up just about anybody. And so they get moved around and into these like, you're on the new super secret project that we've named, or you're on the, but like I meet them along the way. Like I can think of, especially, I don't know why, like women tend to find other women who are who are thinking about things differently, and who are sort of raising to the top. And I have had the opportunity to meet a couple of women like that. And I can think of their names, but I'm not going to name drop because they might not want me to. But yeah, they're out there. They move around a lot, is what ends up happening. It's like, am I going to be able to make a difference here? And they need to be given the latitude to make a difference. And if they aren't, then they'll move on.
Do they have the same type of, because you had your first exposure to startups, it sounded like at UW Business School, and then you continued that through with Cambia, now Echo Health. Um, do they also have that desire to get out in order to make the transformational change, or do they actually believe that transformational change can be done from within?
Depends on how old they are. So I think I think when you're earlier in your career, you need to get, well, you for your own sort of resume building, you need to show some stability, but you also need to show that you're like moving up somewhere. And so my guess is that when I was early in my career, I was like, oh, I'm going to be able to do things. And then as soon as I found out that I wasn't going to be able to achieve the things that I wanted to, like, I would just move to a different company, and usually like this kind of a role. And then the older I got, the sort of less BS I was willing to put up with. This also coincided with my MBA and playing roller derby. And so it was just, and becoming a mom. So it was like, I just hit this point in my life where I was like, no, I'm not going to do this anymore. And I've talked to a couple of people who have also sort of hit that point. They're either at a point in their careers where they can move into more of a consulting role, or they feel confident being able to turn down work if it doesn't sound like it's the type of work that they want to do, or it's not the type of people that they want to work with. So I think there is sort of like yes, I think that there are people who are inside those organizations who want to make change happen. I also think there are people who are brought into organizations with the specific idea that they will catalyze change. And then once they get in there, they realize they're going to be stifled. And so I think there are people who think they can make a difference from within, no matter where they are in their career. But I think ultimately, healthcare organizations are so risk averse just by their nature. That's how they have survived for however long they've been in existence, that it's highly unlikely that they're going to be out in front of anything. The thing that I loved about being a part of the Direct Health Solutions team at Cambia is we were sort of like pulling the company along into, what is greenfield 5 years out, maybe not going to help with the core business, but saying like, hey, there is a lot more innovation happening, and let's open your eyes. As an investment team, we saw 300 companies a year. And so it was awesome to be able to see like natural language processing in 2016 and 17 in healthcare. It was like, wait, what? Like, this is actually happening. But like, there are companies, I mean, we looked at Omada, we looked at what are some of the other, One Medical Group, like we looked at all these huge companies, Accolade, who are IPOing now, and that was like, 8-9 years ago. So it really does take a long time in order for change to take root. It takes a long time for healthcare companies to get um, enough volume to have economies of scale and to be able to really influence change. And if you really are doing something in healthcare that matters, it really will, it will take a long time. And so when you're stuck in a big organization doing the drudgery of that and trying to push a rock up a hill, trying to drive change, and you're just being met with resistance the whole way, the 8 or 9 years it's going to take for you to make change is just going to be like world ending by the time you get it to the top of the hill. So I do think change can come within. I think the grit required to make change from within sort of standard healthcare organizations is insane. And I think you can have change without, but it also is very difficult simply because you don't have the size. So when I see companies like right out of the gate, healthcare companies raising $50 million, in their Series A or whatever it happens to be, it's like, yeah, you're going to be in it for a while. Like, make sure to get lots of runway because this will take a long time. And so, yeah, we just, it's scaling a healthcare company, takes 2-3x longer than a SaaS based organization.
Can I drill in on that a little bit? Like, this is something
Yeah.
that we talk a lot about. In fact, we have our internal name for it, which is the squeeze, which is like healthcare companies today going to raise capital are often held to the exact same standards of, let's call it a
Growth.
SaaS business. Yeah, of growth for a SaaS business. But it just naturally takes 2 to 3 times as long to get there. And you're squeezed. You're like, wait, I raised for 18 months of runway, but it actually is going to take me 36 months. I don't have the progress to get 36, to get the 36 months all the way through. What are your tricks? Like, how do you solve that gap? How do you get over that squeeze?
Honestly, I think there are a couple of different ways. I've seen companies differentiate their revenue streams. So, I've seen a company who was doing a pretty lucrative SaaS-based model expand into, consulting so that they just have ongoing non-SaaS revenue. I've seen at Decent, I'll just tell you, at Decent, we were like, oh, wow, this is, of course. And I'm even here going like, hey, this is going to take a long time. But still, like, we figured out that we had different ways of earning revenue, and how do we essentially attune our contracts to shared savings and upside. And so you really do end up having to get creative. But the other thing that I would say too is the fintech investors. Fintech takes a long time because it's highly regulated. And so we found our lead investor, Cutie, who's awesome, understands that it's going to take a while. And so they really want us to be smart with our runway. They want all their investments to be smart with their runway. And really, like, they're giving us some grace on, the growth expectations, but like, we still have numbers we have to hit. We have investors, they expect return. But having fintech investors and then healthcare investors who really do understand the length of time it's going to take to get to the economies of scale, especially with, you have to buy so many Salesforce licenses, and, having those sort of fixed unit costs, we can only peanut butter those over so many people, so many customers at this point. But once we start to hit the numbers we think we're going to hit as far as growth and membership, et cetera, like, the economics just get better. And it's just about finding your sweet spot and finding that niche. And when I was on the VC side, we would look for teams who could execute. That was a big, like, the idea has to be right. The market has to be big enough. But if you're a team that can demonstrate that you can execute, that was a huge thing as we looked at companies. Like, can they get stuff done?
So you didn't so much look at growth rate per se. Rather, you'd look at, are you making sufficient progress, and perhaps in a surprising way?
Yeah, like healthcare regulatory landscape is grossly unpredictable. And it's like, okay, can you roll with what comes at you from a regulatory standpoint? Because the regulatory component of healthcare is bonkers complicated. Just yuck. And little things would happen that would have to tweak models, and then big things would happen where you had to completely change how you were going to make money as an organization. Like in 2013, if you were doing like patient-centered medical homes or accountable care organizations, and you were going to provide software for providers, there was sort of a thought that you were going to get paid by the providers, and then you weren't really sure how the providers were going to make the money. And then Medicare changed how they were going to pay providers for quality under the Medicare Advantage program. And now all of a sudden you had to be a Medicare Advantage stars expert to figure out how you could help everybody get paid more money. And so it was just, I mean, that was a huge change in how, where your revenue was going to come from. To be really simply, it wasn't going to be this, providers are going to pay for this. It's okay, provider, partner, you're going to pay a small fee, and then we're going to share in the upside, and we'll give you all these things because the upside is so freaking huge. So let's do it that way, and that's the way we're all going to make money now. So it's, yeah, I mean, there's
You got to be
there's
creative.
all sorts of, yeah, you got to be creative. And Nick Soman, who you talk to, is like, his favorite thing is to like thread a needle. And so like when I was first talking to him, he's like, yeah, we're going to do this, but we're also going to do this, and we're going to do this, and this is going to, blah, 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 blah. And nothing he was saying relied on regulatory. It was like, this is how it is today. We can do it as it is today. And I'm like, okay, but what if this happens in the regulatory? And what if this happens? Or what if something, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, okay, well, we can do, he's like so good at threading that needle. And it's aggravating sometimes, because sometimes it's like next shiny object, but understanding the next shiny object in healthcare and whether you want to pursue it or not, can honestly help you when the regulatory comes down. It's like, hey, that shiny object that we like tossed aside a year ago, yeah, we're going to need to do that now because that's now required as a regulatory component.
Yeah. So we talked about with Nick, it was like regulatory compliance or having that top of mind from day one. Can you take us back to, you had that phone call with Nick. Nick called you back, said, hey, I raised 8 million. Do you want to join? You're like, yes, I do. I have lots of opinions. How did you get started? Where did you start?
Yeah. Okay. So when we originally started Decent, there was a blockchain component to it. And I was stoked, because if you can get blockchain, especially smart contract, like Ethereum based things happening in healthcare, you could get healthcare claims paid in an instant. But I didn't understand really at that point how blockchain worked. I just understood examples of how it could work in a business setting. And so when I landed, it was like, the first thing we did was I said, this is how I want to build the health plan. And I drew this little bullseye on the board, and direct primary care was in the middle. And then it was bundled radiology and surgical case payments going out. And then there was going to have to be specialty fee for service. And then there was hospital payments on DRG and, upside risk sharing and stuff like that. And then we would have to have a stop loss that sat behind all of that. And then we would need a pharmacy partner to do prescriptions. And so I drew this like bullseye on the board. This is how it should go. Eliminate as much fee for service out of the system as possible. Once you can eliminate as much fee for service out of the system as possible, you're processing less claims and you automatically have less overhead that you need. We also made the decision really early on to act in a very hands-off way by deploying sort of what you would consider best clinical practices. So support shared decision making between patient and provider, make sure that the patient is well taken care of, that we have everything at our disposal to answer all their questions. So whether it's text messaging or drift chat on our website, or speed time of pickup on our 1-800 number, like we needed to make sure that people felt really confident in Decent and the care that they were receiving. But the other thing is, in working with direct primary care, like they're the best physicians. They take time with you. They want to get to know you. They're hugely sticky. Once you're in, people don't ever want to leave. And so one of the things we recognized really early on was, do not mess with that care model. Like, don't do it. Don't mess with the care model. People love the care model. The care model takes care of people. They have better outcomes. It's less expensive overall. Like, just get out of the way. So we have, no copay if you go see your primary care physician. They are your care management, disease management, utilization management provider. And that it's way more effective that way. There are studies that have been published that say, like, if your physician is involved in your care planning and your follow-up care, and basically making sure that you refill your prescriptions and take your meds and are doing your HbA1c, measurements, like, the outcomes are statistically significantly better. And so we just said, okay, just get out of the middle of that decision process, remove fee for service, which is removing the perverse incentives of physicians to see you every single time something wrong. It's like, you better come in, you need a prescription refill, oh, you better come in. It's like, no one has time for that. This can all be done over the phone. And so it's a little bit, let's use best practices and leverage, convenience everywhere we possibly can, but let's remove bad incentives. So one of the things that we did is we worked with a company who did bundled surgical cases. And cash-based radiology pricing. So it was like, nobody's getting a kickback. You're not your primary care inside of a huge multi-specialty system who gets a year-end bonus for how much care they refer into the system versus out of the system, which is a pretty easy leakage report. So it's just like, it was like, okay, we know these things are bad. Let's get as much out as we can. And then on the typically of the healthcare dollar, right, 85 cents of every dollar goes back to paying claims. So dealing with removing the fee for service and all the credit out of that 85 cents of the dollar, that's kind of where we started, because it's going to make the biggest impact. And then we moved over to the administration side. And this is where we were going to leverage blockchain technology and then other technology. And the thing that I was stoked about at Decent is we had no legacy technology. So at Aetna, at United, at Regents, the claims processing systems that they all used were like DOS-based systems that had been in existence for I don't know how long, had been manipulated to the hilt. There was like Bob on the 4th floor maintaining this one system at Regents, and I'm not even kidding. And then Debbie was the only person who could get reports out of it because she knew it was ridiculous. And so we didn't have any of that overhead. I mean, we were building a whole new stack of technology from scratch. And it was painful realizing that where we could leverage blockchain technology to drive down that admin overhead like we thought we would be able to, and where that was actually going to, and the timeline of where that rubber was going to meet the road was like way, way far out. And so since we were, essentially building a health plan and we had 12 months, we were like, okay, we need to like build the boring stuff so that we can operate as a health plan, and then we can build the exciting stuff later. And we haven't built the exciting blockchain stuff yet. And some of it is the identity protection, et cetera. The HIPAA stuff on blockchain is really hard. And some of it is like claims processing protocol getting built into code, and then having a community then go forth and manage that code rather than and it was just like, this is not what blockchain was meant to do. It's supposed to be decentralized. It's supposed to be, no. So that sort of went away. And so now we're, doing a bunch of different things, but the very, very first place we started on that very first day was, what do we want this to look like from a patient experience? How do we get all these extra people that sort of half stand in your exam room out of the exam room? And how do we really make this sort of be what should be the right thing in healthcare, where people aren't incented to do bad things or overutilize. Patients are incented to go to the doctor when they need to go to the doctor. Insurance companies are just incented to pay the freaking claim. And like everybody sort of plays what their part should be.
Yep. So you realized, all right, our innovation is, at least today, not going to be on the administrative side per se. We're going to focus on the health plan side, which is the most important side. What was the hardest part of constructing, actually realizing that bullseye?
Realizing that healthcare software, I'll just use claims software as an example. It's almost impossible to build from scratch.
What makes it impossible?
So, okay, imagine a really big decision tree. This decision tree includes 70,000 CPT codes in conjunction with approximately 70,000 ICD-10 diagnosis codes, in conjunction with health plan modifiers, and then using that's just one claim. And then occasionally you'll have to pair that claim with another claim in order to figure out if they're both legit. And so it was like, oh my God, we're not going to build this. We actually talked to the guy who was the CTO at the time. Oscar Health built their claim system, and they built theirs from scratch. It took them 2+ years and 40+ devs to build it. And I was like, oh, so that's why you raised $300 million from Google. Like, oh my God. And so we were just like, oh, this is not good. So that was like the worst thing, that no matter how hard we tried to remove fee for service from the system, no matter how many claims we essentially don't have because we don't, our providers don't bill fee for service, we still were going to end up having to build some very robust or buy some very robust technology to process and pay claims. And that is still an ongoing thing that we will probably deal with until Oscar maybe starts to outsource their claims processing software for a small fee.
Yeah, this feels like one of those areas. There's like many tropes of, okay, everybody who wants to start a startup is going to start like a note-taking app. In healthcare, it's like anybody's going to start either an EHR company, or it does kind of feel like people are going to start like, I'm going to reinvent claims processing.
I'm going to reinvent claims processing. There's like, so in addition to all this really fun stuff that I've done with my career, one of the things that I did was become a certified medical coder at one point in 2010. And so the minute detail to which I can dissect a claim is gross. And I just look at that and go like, nope, we don't want to do that. Like, unless we want that to be 100% our business, like, no. That, I mean, again, Oscar spent hundreds of millions of dollars, 2 years, 42 devs, like, nobody needs to ever do that again. Like, so if someone from Oscar is listening, can I please have access to your claims processing software? I will pay you a small fortune, but not as much as just buying that and having it on my own system. I know, like, the redundancy and the castle building that happens in healthcare is atrocious.
Do you think it's proprietary?
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure it is.
Well, in the sense that, is it just a utility that more or less every company that would need it is going to use it for more or less the same reason? It's not actually value additive. It's merely something you need if you want to be in business.
Yeah, it's like Epic for hospitals, electronic medical records. Epic is a utility. At this point, you're on Epic or Cerner or McKesson or some other huge, they're almost all the same. Like, if the government said, here's Epic for everyone, people would be like, God, no, we can't. But basically that's what everybody wants. They just have to pay millions of dollars to have the choice to do it. Like, good old Judy over at Epic, you know, she's just sitting on her huge pile of money. And Epic could connect to, you know, a claims processing software. Epic, I mean, yeah, I mean, everybody's trying to get their nickel out of the system, but there are like very straightforward ways in which there needs to be no humans or no extraneous processes, like, you know.
So you made the decision, okay, we have to buy this off the shelf because that's what will enable us to actually design and build this health plan. In building the health plan, like, we're pretty familiar with DPC. We love DPC. My son's a patient of a DPC practice here in Seattle. What was the hardest part of, okay, was it actually talking to so you mentioned specialty fee for service circle that you're like, okay, sorry, necessary evil, we must tap into you? Was it the hospital groups? Like, where did you find the most friction?
Honestly, we found the most friction at the DPC level.
Great.
Because they didn't want to work with health insurance. We're like, listen, no, we're different. We're not going to do these horrible things. And we had to like bring in somebody to be like, they're legit. In working with Cambia and Direct Health Solutions, we'd invested in Q Alliance. And so I had worked with Dr. Erica Bliss, who is awesome. And I was at a conference with her and I said, what are some of the things that I shouldn't be trying to do with this community? Like, what are the things that you would recommend against any of your DPCs doing? And one of the things she recommended was, hey, you never want to be, a huge percentage of somebody's business. Because if they rely too much on you, when something bad happens, like, you'll have tainted, your spot in this community forever. And I'm like, all right. So the other thing that I sort of knew, and I didn't want any DPC to have to like change how they practiced. And so trying to convince DPCs that even though we were a health insurance company, that we weren't going to ask them to change the way that they practice, that we were going to pay them their fair market rate, that we were, going to limit their exposure to us as a new entrant into the market. Like, I had to buy steak dinners in order to get people over the hump. And so we launched in Texas, and in Texas, if you do not meet with someone face to face, they will not tell you the real deal. And this has been my experience anyway with providers in Texas. And so we had to sit them down and we're like, what are your real concerns? And they're like, we don't want you to make us, add overhead to our practices. We don't want to have to order labs in a different way. We want to still be able to do the things in the office that we've been doing in the office. We want to be able to fire our patients who we don't like. We really want to be able to operate autonomously. And I was like, okay, so our provider contract is 2 pages with DPCs. And it basically says, you will adhere to your patient agreement that you have between you and your patient. And that includes all the HIPAA stuff. They all have to have all that disclosure stuff in there. So all the stuff's in there. You will adhere to your patient, agreement between you and the patient. And we just pay you. We'll pay you once a month. That's our entire involvement. If you refer them, if they need care outside of your office, the only thing we ask is that you refer them in network. And so then we had some operational stuff to work out, but like working to get DPCs over the hump was the hardest thing to do. Hospitals and specialists, and they all understand the deal. It's like, yep, it's a contract. We want to know what we're going to get paid and how fast we can get out and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, okay. So that was kind of blocking and tackling. We just didn't have a lot of people to do it. But getting DPCs to trust that you weren't going to screw them over, that was a huge hurdle. And now we got a bunch of traction, and we, are treating them right, and we're doing what we said we were going to do. And that means a lot to people who have sort of been burned by the system before. And so we love our DPCs. We're growing our network all the time. Like, we want to do the hard work of giving DPCs more business. A lot of DPCs do not enjoy marketing themselves. And so we've been happy to partner with them in marketing efforts, or just sending them membership through the employers we have on the plan. But the DPCs were the hardest to get over the hump.
That's fair. They're on the cutting edge. They opted out of the system for a reason.
They did.
So, and anything pulling them back, we can attest from personal experience. They're like, no, thanks. Leave me alone. Thank you.
Yeah. They're very friendly.
Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
They're amazing physicians. But I could see that. Well, I know we're running into time. Maybe one last question is, what would you say to someone like you within the system to encourage them to get out and start something?
Yeah, I would sort of say, you want to just burn it all down. So maybe try to light the house on fire from outside the house. I feel like there are people who are sort of trying to stick it out inside the 4 walls, inside the castles that are being built. And what I would say is, the hard work you're doing in there probably could be better served in a place that will be receptive to the kind of change that you're trying to push through. But the other thing that I will say is, if you come out of health plan administration or the provider side, and the thing you want to pursue is taking that extra 1% out of the stars bonus or whatever, so that you can make $25 million a year and not change the system at all, just stay inside the system. Like, there's enough innovation floating around that's just grabbing at like little tiny minute, rounding errors in the healthcare spend, which is, almost 20% of our GDP. But like, get out and change something. Stop just grabbing at all that money. Doesn't add value. Charge capture on the hospital side, and speeding up, denials or whatever on the health plan side. Like, stop that. Don't do that.
I think we like that message. We hope everyone hears that message. Yeah, thank you for the time, Molly. It was really good to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you both. Good luck.
So obviously her thoughts on who is the best target, or like how to find more of hers, were pretty interesting. I think her thoughts on the squeeze were pretty interesting. And then I sort of like enjoyed the talk of like the claims processing and like that being sort of like
I definitely love that. I love hearing when something is deemed impossible because it's complex. I'm like, okay, yeah, 2 years, 40 engineers, but they did it. And there are, like, I think of Collective Health, who is a TPA for self-funded employers, and they've raised a boatload of money. I wonder how that's going. And is it that everyone is trying to, like she called it, build their own castles and keep it in? But I wonder if there's a way to just unlock that. And if you did that, would that make a meaningful difference in the number of companies out there that are innovating on these at like the health level?
yeah, like do people get stuck because they can't afford it, they don't know where to go to buy it, like whatever, it's not flexible enough for them? Do people get stuck and they're not able to actually start companies as a result of not being able to reinvent claims processing?
Right. And I do wonder how many venture dollars have been wasted on just claims processing.
Yeah, right. Like this is to our normal, like should there be an AWS like service that just does claims processing?
Right. And then to the squeeze, I did really enjoy the find investors who have long time horizons / a lot of patience.
Yep. Yeah, I like in my head what I distilled her statement down to was, you better be damn creative and you better have patience and find other people with patience.
Yeah.
It's like you got to find a way to survive, so just be creative. But you got to also recognize it's going to take some time, so be patient and find other people who are patient.
Yeah. And I think that speaks then to how do you find investors? You better qualify for that pretty upfront, because I wonder how many investors say, yeah, I don't know, we really want to invest in healthcare, but then they're not backing it up with the attitude. And then, yes, the recruiting, I think we need more. We need more Mollies.
Yeah. I thought it was really interesting. Like her career shift happened at her MBA program.
Yeah.
Like it was like provider, payer, then MBA, then holy shit, right? Like there's this whole other world, like entrepreneurship and startups and investing and venture, and then like I don't know, like I got excited from that. And so in my head, I'm like, well, if we're looking for interesting mollies, it's like, oh, well, go to the MBA programs and find out the people who came from the healthcare world.
Totally. Who took entrepreneurial classes and see whether they have that fire in them. Yes, completely that. Look for the high growth, lots of lateral moves or different projects. I like her tip on fuzzy amorphous titles. It's like, that sounds perfect. I thought it was interesting the way she spoke about a health plan, just because it's very hard to get down to like the nuts and bolts of what that means. It is exactly what Nick said, which is she went up to a whiteboard and drew a bullseye. And I actually really loved her intention, her very purposeful way of getting to SEIU 775, which is that home care worker union benefits group. I that's such a strategic way to think about the world of, okay, well, they're going to be caring for the largest generation of Americans we've ever seen. I want to make sure that they have fantastic care. Plus, and we know this from burnout, like caregiving sees chronic burnout, but you get to innovate a lot on the benefit side. And so then you get to see a lot, and you get to, I think from Nick also, and she kind of hinted at it, I think that's where she came across DPC. although also Q lines from EcoHealth or Cambia. But I think that's also an interesting place to see, are there people who are in groups like that see all these really innovative patient-centric solutions because they have to, and design these types of things and are like, I want to get out of this.
I like seeing the insider's perspective on a lot of this. It in some ways it demystifies it, right? Like it's not it's not like some
monolithic
it's like
thing.
Like crazy art, like magic voodoo science, like just weird. It's like, no, we have a provider agreement with the DPC and it's 2 pages long. Like that's how we work with DPCs, right? Like,
right. And then we talk to all the hospitals and the specialist groups and
they just want to make money. So
they're
cool,
like,
right?
Plug in. Yeah, here you go. Send again to Nick's point of steerage. It does just work like that.
It just feels like I look at a hospital system and I'm just like, I don't even know how you start to talk to them, but it's just legitimately like, hey, like we want to send you patients. Can we just ink a quick deal?
Can we send you? Yeah. I'm sure there's more nuance there and complexity, but the incentive is there to just be like, yeah, of course we'll talk. Okay, you want to send people? Great. We're incentivized to receive that. Let's do this.